what we want to do, and when I say we, I mean my research group at Stanford. Right now, we are 17 researchers, and I'm sort of the principal investigator, so the leader of the research team.
Annelise, how did you find Carnivore?
Oh, thank you, Dave. I found Carnivore by word of mouth through a friend who had tried it himself because he had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and he tried everything and nothing was working. And for him, going to a diet of ground beef alone really made a huge difference and helped him tremendously. And then he recommended it to me in, I think, late 2017. And I thought about it and, kind of initially dismissed it as totally insane, because he was eating like just ground beef, right? And if you're used to having this beautiful, like I'd always prided myself on being a good cook and I make the best homemade bread, the best pies, the best cakes, and all that stuff, big pasta dishes. That was how I kind of grew up, right? Always, there was always meat, but it was a small part of the meal, and you put a lot of time into the mashed potatoes or the Yorkshire pudding or whatever, that sort of thing. And so I was very used to that, and those things are delicious, right? But nonetheless, I had to admit that, starting at about age 45, and I'm 55 now, that it became very difficult to keep the weight off despite even exercising. Like, exercise was not enough. And because I was overweight, I didn't really feel very much like exercising either. And that was kind of a problem, right? But I certainly went through bouts where I tried everything else. Let's just say that, right? I tried vegetarian, I tried exercising like crazy, and I never had tried fasting, and we'll talk about that later, which I now do. But so then I saw Dr. Sean Baker on the Joe Rogan podcast, and that was really a revelation for me because I said, oh, apparently my friend is not crazy. I mean, I knew he wasn't crazy, but here's someone on Joe Rogan, and I listened to the whole story, and I thought it was very, meaningful, and so I decided I'm going to try it, and I tried it and started it January 1st of 2020. So that is now more than 4.5 years ago, and it's been an absolutely extraordinary journey. Totally changed my life, made me into such a happier person. And I can, I did do one prior interview with you where I went into maybe a bit more detail, but here, because I want to cover some other subjects as well, I'll just kind of summarize all the things I fixed. So I lost 65 pounds and I got down to the weight I'd been when I was about 16, which is around 130, 132. And, that was a huge life-changing thing as well. And I did that. So I guess that was 4.5 years ago. So I was 51 when I did that. And, I found that it was pretty easy to keep the weight off if I stuck with carnivore. And the things that improved are, so I had early stage type 2 diabetes, which my mother has also, and that reversed. And actually, I just had my blood test and all my analysis of my numbers done only like 4 days ago. And my A1C was 5.0, which is great, right? And my HDL was really high, 104, which is pretty unusually high, yeah. And then, but my LDL was also very high, like 276. So my and well, I think triglycerides were low, HDL was really beautifully high, but LDL was high too. And so, my doctor is concerned by the total cholesterol number, but I did a CAC, calcified arterial, I can't remember the last what it stands for, a CAC analysis like last October, and I have 0 plaque. So, and that was after having done carnivore for many years. So that was very interesting. And, my numbers, I think I'm very comfortable with my numbers. I'm not worried about high LDL at all. And I just want to encourage other people not to be afraid of high LDL. it's fine. And so got rid of type 2 diabetes, and that, of course, extends your expected lifespan substantially, right? My skin got much better, and I always say, like, by the time it was over, it was like I almost looked like my own daughter compared to the way I had looked, and we see these extraordinary transformations. My periodontal health got so much better. So I had receding gums and very sensitive gums that would bleed when I flossed. That doesn't happen anymore. And my dentist was so amazed. Like, when I went back, he's like, wow, your gums are incredible. Like, it was clear he doesn't see that very often, right? Nor, as I recall, the dentist will floss, when he does your cleaning. And I remember there was always a lot of blood. This time, zero, so really healthy gums. And that's important. And then I had severe plantar fasciitis, especially after a bout of green juicing that I was before I started carnivore. I did like several months of, trying to consume only green juices. That was kind of trendy for a while there, right? And I did it thinking it was good for me, but it gave me so much pain, and I think that was oxalate crystallization, because I was using spinach, and I think, you eat too much oxalates, they build up, especially in your feet, which is kind of like, interesting, because that's where people get gout as well, right? They get uric acid crystals. Yeah. So the pain was actually excruciating. So that it was painful to walk at all. That was crazy. I mean, I wasn't that old, right? I was maybe 50, 51. At that time, I was probably 49. But, it was hard to believe you'd be practically a cripple for no apparent reason, right? It seemed like no apparent reason at the time, because at the time, I did not connect it to the green juices, right? The green juices were sort of like spinach, kale, Granny Smith apples, ginger, cucumber, right? And, it didn't taste half bad. It's kind of like a savory apple juice. But, it was really bad for me. So I hope people don't do that. I know there's probably still people doing green juices out there. You just shake our heads, right? Let's see. What else got better? I would say that's very significant is just, it really, and I hear this from so many of your interviewees, because I listen to them all, that that my personality changed. Honestly, like, I became such a more mellow person and a happy person. And whereas I would say prior to doing carnivore, I was more prone to sort of ruminating, like overthinking, thinking about myself and my life, my future, just being anxious about things. And then somehow, cutting all the carbs out of my diet, because I'm a pretty simple carnivore, just steak, eggs, butter. That's it. Very occasionally oysters, but that's it. And the fact that what you're eating can be changing your personality. So for people that are eating standard American diet, it's changing their personality for the worse, right? And for some people, that's very severe, right? They can be very depressed or anxious. But even if it just makes you kind of a calmer person who's less reactive to anything that might be upsetting, but you're able to sort of take a breath, observe, listen, and not react in haste. I mean, that will change your life right there, especially in a professional environment, as well as in your family, with your family in your home. It'll just make everybody much happier. And so, I live, I'm now 55, and I live with my son who just turned 13, and he's carnivore too. And we're two very, happy, calm people. And so it's a beautiful life, on this diet. And I'll mention this now, right? I'm a professor at Stanford in bioengineering. I don't think any of my other colleagues are on carnivore. Oh, wait, one in chemical engineering is on carnivore that I know of. but I'm still really very much the outlier. But I've always been sort of the early adopter type of person, you know, like you name it, I try it usually like 6 months before other people.
Being a professor at Stanford, and based on a discussion last time, one of the improvements that you've listed there is pretty important for us for our long-term health, and that was the periodontal disease. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me, in a much more succinct way than in my first interview, let me summarize why periodontal health is such a key to mental health and preventing loss of cognition as you age. Okay. This is something my research group is working on. Um, I can't, like we're in the midst of fully proving this that I'm about to say. But I always do like to say, I have this funny little saying I say, which is, I may be many things in the context of a scientist. I may be many things, but wrong is usually not one of them. That may sound arrogant, but it is true, because I think through things very deeply for a long time. So to summarize, a lot of scientific research done by myriads of scientists all around the world, it appears that the bacteria that cause gum disease, periodontitis, and gingivitis, one example of a keystone pathogen being Porphyromonas gingivalis, or PG for short. It's an example of an anaerobic bacterium that takes advantage of inflammation in your body to dig itself under your gums where it likes to reside because it is killed by oxygen. It's an anaerobic bacteria. So it makes enzymes to dig itself down under your gums deeply. There's a collagenase, an enzyme that breaks down collagen. And then there's 3 different enzymes that break down proteins called proteases. And in particular, those are called gingipane proteases. And the gingipanes very aggressively chew up proteins. And that helps with digging under your gums. But it also provides food for the bacterium because this particular bacterium, P. gingivalis, only eats amino acids. It doesn't eat sugar. So it's kind of an extraordinary, because most bacteria survives on sugar, right? This one not. So what PG does is it digs down under your gums and then it sits there in its little colony, a whole bunch of bacteria all being friends with each other and living happily under your gums. And then it starts cranking out these enzymes, especially those gingipane enzymes. Well, in the midst of chewing up your free proteins, it turns off the immune system of your mouth. Furthermore, those things, because you're constantly swallowing your saliva all day, I think you swallow like a quart of saliva a day. It's a lot. Full of those enzymes, these things disseminate throughout and infect the whole body. So it very nicely turns off the immune system for your whole body. And in particular, it turns off a response called the interferon response, which is like the kind of it inactivates tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is your important, response against like bacterial infection and everything. And then it turns off your interferon response, which is your important response against viruses. So now you're just like, free game, whatever. You're just like open for any pathogen that should come floating by or get kissed onto you or whatever. And that's very relevant, the kissing onto you part, because once your interferon response is turned off, particular interferon lambda response, and this was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This is very strong science, okay? Well, now you can't fight viruses. And in particular, you can't fight herpes viruses. And there are, let's see if I can get this right, nine, I'm trying to center it, 9 different endemic herpes viruses that are just everywhere. And, if you live up to a certain age on this planet, you're going to be carrying a few of them. And the worst are herpes simplex virus 1, human cytomegalovirus, and Epstein-Barr virus. They all cause diseases, but they especially cause they can cause loss of cognition because they can travel through the nerves in your face, pop out straight in your brain. There's no blood-brain barrier, and proceed to infect your brain. And the way your brain responds to a viral infection is it eats itself. So the immune cells of your brain, called microglia, which are dedicated to the brain, they just, if they find an infected cell, like, and all of those herpes viruses go into your neurons and other cells, it will just eat it. It will kill it and eat it. So that's why someone who has Alzheimer's, by the time they die, they have lost 1/3 of their brain mass. So you see, it's actually kind of simple when you understand it. Mouth infection, periodontal disease makes a permissive environment for viruses. They travel through your nerves, go to your brain, and go to town. And over time, and this is all very slow, right? 10, 15 years.
It's so scary, but it's also very positive that almost everyone I speak to who's on a carnivore diet has reversed the gum problems that they've had.
Yeah, and they get, and a lot of them, I've probably heard at least 5 people say that they previously had bad breath, and then, noticeably, because they live with a spouse or whatever, that wasn't a problem anymore after they went carnivore. And in fact, that condition, halitosis, is a sign of being colonized by these anaerobic bacteria. So it's absolutely, one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you again, Dave, and we'll get to this, is that you, through your particular interviewing style and just you being you have made a very great scientific discovery, which now I know because I watch all your interviews. And we believe then that the carnivore diet is very likely a very strong way to prevent these things from happening. And I should mention, it's not only Alzheimer's disease, because gingivitis caused by P. gingivalis is also correlated with rheumatoid arthritis, and that usually gets better too, right? And it's correlated with risk of pancreatic cancer, or pancreatitis can often precede pancreatic cancer, just because this process I've described, which when happening in the mouth affects the brain, it gets disseminated through the whole body. And I think what I'm thinking is that, the part I haven't understood yet is, since these bacteria eat amino acids, you'd almost think they'd like beef, right? Because that's proteins that break down to amino acids. But somehow when you stop eating all carbs, and I think most of us are sort of 50-50 protein fat on average. For me, it's just beef, eggs, butter. I don't understand, why does P. gingivalis stop growing when it doesn't get sugar, when it doesn't eat sugar? And I think it could be that because most of the bacteria in your mouth do eat sugar, and it's probably dining on the carcasses of those as well, the PG.
Yeah, is it just that maybe the sugar for all the other bacteria, they enable the weakened environment so that the amino feeding one can get in there, the PG can get in there.
I mean, it must be the case, right? Because we observe that the gums heal. Therefore, these organisms, like in my gums, they became very kind of pale pink and tight to my teeth and kind of grow down. And so what I think is that the PG actually just gets expelled. It's just not there anymore. And this is why people's joint pain goes away. And I also should say, the earliest signs of Alzheimer's disease are anxiety and depression. And those are things that clear up within 30 days, maybe not totally, but typically anxiety will lessen quickly and depression will go away within 30 days. And of course, we have Dr. Georgia Eid and Dr. Chris Palmer working on this. And I just want to talk about the fact that all the brilliant people in our space, in the carnivore space, that are talking about all of this, they're talking about inflammation, neuroinflammation. Georgia Eid is talking mostly about malnutrition, right? The brain needs these particular animal fats and proteins. But, I have yet to hear a single one of them, other than myself, talk about sort of the upstream of the inflammation, which is, I believe, the infection. Right. So when you, and as a scientist, as a biomedical researcher, if we want to solve a problem, you must first understand the problem. Right. Now, it looks like, and I'm getting this from your interviews, in a way, it's kind of a solved problem now, because I think if someone starts carnivore relatively young, say 40, 40, 45, I don't think they would ever get dementia. I really don't. But, you have to be pretty strict, and that's hard for some people. But I think what I've also heard many of your recent guests, because you have this question that you work into the interview, which is, do you think you would ever go back to a different way of eating now that you've discovered carnivore and you've benefited from it? And they pretty much all say no, and their reason is usually like, I just couldn't go back to feeling the way I felt before. And I agree with that. This is an absolutely beautiful example of how citizen science is in many ways so much more powerful than corporate pharmaceutical science and even academic research, because the narratives that one sees, even in the scientific journals these days, not always, of course, but a significant fraction of the time, is influenced by helping the pharmaceutical company maintain a bottom line they're happy with, right? Yeah. So citizen science is a bunch of people talking about how they feel and what happened in their own lives. They have no reason to lie, and they have no conflicts of interest. And in fact, they're often kind of taking a risk, putting their face out there and saying, hey, I don't eat like everybody else. And I love this thing that keeps coming up in some of the interviews where people say, I could be stuffing my face with donuts, fat as a pig, limping and not able to walk, and my family wouldn't say a word. But as soon as I'm healthy and lost a ton of weight and eating steaks, now they're freaked out. It's the craziest thing.
And suddenly everyone's now an expert on fiber and cholesterol, and they're advising you.
Yeah,
Bank
they would
tellers,
also,
mechanics. Yeah.
and then also the way that they just can't wrap their head around the concept, right? And Carrie's been saying this. So you tell people about it and they go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. But you still eat vegetables, right? And then when you say no plants, no plants at all, no fruits, no grains, no breads, nothing, meat, eggs, butter, water. And they can't believe it. And they think, it's, but I think we're all experiencing this right now. It's like almost everything going around us. There's all this cognitive dissonance, right? We're like, wait, the powers that be have been telling us exactly the opposite of what is true.
Yeah. And it's just like, and every time you notice something like that, you're resolved to just kind of, okay, well, I guess this is me on my own from now on.
Yeah,
I've just
but
got to,
it's beautiful because there's also this trend in the world towards decentralizing things. And really what you can think about is like, we will simultaneously have more local communities, right? Buying beef from our local rancher and having our own chickens in the backyard, which I do. I have 15 chickens. But at the same time, creating global communities like you are. It's really quite beautiful the way it's all evolved. And I think it's going to be a happier world after our little chaotic period we're about to have.
yeah, yeah. So speaking of the beef and the chickens and the eggs, um, you haven't been eating any of the beef and chickens and the eggs for a while, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm on, it's really day 20 of a fast. But what I started out doing was, for the first 12 days, I was prepping for the fast. So I actually cut out the eggs and just did one meal a day, just a beef. And I kind of, tapered down from the amount I would normally eat to less and less and less over those 12 days, and drinking just water, just so that it wouldn't be a shock to my system when I stopped eating entirely. And of course, if you're not consuming even a tiny bit of carbs, that hunger impulse just really is turned down a lot. And then 8 days ago, I started with a pure water fast, and I haven't eaten anything. And the only things I do take are I take colostrum, which helps coat and protect the gut lining. And I do take probiotic supplements before bed. I actually take 4 different probiotics. Again, we're trying to keep the microbiome in the gut alive. And then there's one thing that I do put in my mouth, but it's not really food in a way for me, which is sauerkraut. Sauerkraut has 0 calories, just plain sauerkraut, but it has salt, which you need, right? Even during a fast, you need electrolytes because you'll slowly run down your electrolytes. And then, of course, all your muscles, all the processes in your body need a variety of salts. They need, all the sort of common ones: sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, etc. But then they also need other trace minerals because those help enzymes be active. So I take a trace minerals capsule as well as an electrolyte pill. But I really believe that these artificial sweeteners like stevia, I think it's not really a pure fast if you're using any artificial sweeteners or putting sweet taste in your mouth. So I just do electrolyte capsules, like 5 a day that I space throughout the day. And then the reason for the sauerkraut is that is really the most ideal kind of insoluble fiber for the bacteria in your gut. And the last fast I did 1 year ago was a 40-day water fast, and I was not doing the colostrum. I was not careful enough about the electrolytes, and mine got out of whack. And I didn't, my gut, all activity of my gut just completely stopped. Like by day 4, nothing. And then it didn't come back until like 10 days after I'd stopped the fast. So that was like 46 days later. And I'm not sure, you could argue that it's good for the gut to rest. And I'm sure in some ways it is. But I had such a hard time kind of restarting a normal gut activity with the last fast. I think it's better to just feed my little friends. They get the sauerkraut so that they don't get too upset.
So are you aiming for 40 days again?
I think it'll be longer this time. Because I'm not having like a set number of days. I'm already on day 8. And I feel great. And I just want people to understand, because I think people don't understand this, right? I'm not hungry. I have 0 discomfort. I don't have trouble falling asleep. I don't wake up hungry. I feel fine. It's what it is. It's a mental thing. And of course, people kind of believe that if they fasted more than, say, 3 days, that they would suffer. They think of it like they're going to suffer more and more and more. But if anybody's watched Jason Fung's videos, he's very encouraging to people. And he says, you can fast, you can do it. He keeps trying to tell people they can fast. But, and I did watch a ton of his content a long time ago, but it's really not hard. I mean, the first few days are hard, but I think if you manage your electrolytes I think this sauerkraut trick is awesome. So I sort of, maybe when I do have completed the fast and then done what they call the refeeding and get everything's back in order, maybe I'll come back and talk to you again about the experience of it. You know how this Scottish guy has the world record, right?
Oh, yeah, from years and years and years ago.
Oh yeah, it was like this late 60s or 70s, right? Angus, I think is his name, which is a great Scottish name. And yeah, he did 389 days, I think. Yeah, he started like 450 pounds and got down to 180 and stayed there for the rest of his life. And I should say, the weight I lost with that first fast, I never put it back on. It stayed on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And sorry, how much did you take off that time?
It was like 36 pounds. Yeah. So, I just got impatient. Part of the reason I got impatient is there was this guy I liked, and I'm like, and I like said, let's wait and meet. Let's wait and meet in like 2 months, you know. So I thought, well, maybe things will go better if I do this fast first. So it was kind of vanity in a way, or just liking somebody, but it was one of the best things I've ever done. And I should have mentioned too, it's not only physical, it's actually very spiritual, because if you're calm when you're eating carnivore, you are like way more calm when you're fasting. It's really amazing.
Having the food is all mental, because a lot of that mental challenge goes away going on carnivore.
Yeah,
But then when you're fasting, it feels like you've just got to get past that first hump of like,
exactly.
it's almost routine or habit. You get
Yeah.
past that bit, and then it's clear sailing from there.
Yeah, and one thing I did notice is prior to doing the sort of 12-day prep for the fast, I was in a rhythm of 2 meals a day that were usually maybe like 11 and 3 or 4, something like that. And I would have sort of, eggs one the first meal, and then I would have steak the second meal, and butter, a little bit of butter both times. And so what I did notice is that doing the prep, like when it came the time that my body expected a meal, because I was pretty regular before, I would feel that urge, or with carnivore, it's not really strong hunger, but some hunger. And so I did have to kind of, get through that. And then the interesting thing is that when you start the full water fast, about day 3, you will find your hunger getting stronger, and it'll kind of peak, and it'll be quite challenging. And then your assumption is it's only going to get worse, right? But the truth is it will go away like in one day. But I understand why a lot of people quit at 3 days, because it seems like you're going to have to quit on that third day, but you really don't.
Wow. So you just got to push through.
You got to
And
just
yeah.
push through it. And I would say, even one thing I would mention is, I teach this class at Stanford in bioengineering that's called Bioengineering Innate Immunity. And I give a lecture on fasting and autophagy. So, autophagy is a word that a lot of your viewers will be familiar with, and it's the body's process of cleaning itself up, right? And, just getting rid of dead cells, and particularly getting rid of infected cells, and repairing mitochondria, just getting everything in shipshape, working order, because it has the energy and time to do that, because it's not focused on digestion. And it will also clear cancer cells. So it will be able to recognize and clear cancer cells. So I think that to do, let's say, for a person that's already at an almost ideal weight, like you are, who's generally healthy, like you are, then if you were concerned about just making sure you prevented anything, doing one extended water fast per year would probably be sufficient. And probably for someone, doing something like 12, 15 days, you could do less. 21 days would be ideal. But even if you did, 5 or 6, when you hit day 3, and you probably know this, that when you do a water fast, you hit day 3, all your immune cells get replaced with fresh ones. So your entire immune system is regenerated from scratch.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
And the guy who discovered the autophagy process, he won the Nobel Prize in 2016. It's that important, and it's still being studied.
Wow. That's really interesting.
And you have to think, like, can you imagine what it was like? Let's call it, when the cave paintings were being made. I've actually visited those, the Lascaux caves in Burgundy in France. They're amazing. So at that time, imagine a winter time. Yeah, if you were lucky, you had some meat to eat, but I bet you did some fasting during winter, which is the reason why when we eat fruit, which is normally ripens in the fall, that the first thing we do is just pile on fat, right? Every time we eat fruit, fructose makes us pile on fat, because then we needed it during those winters. kept us alive. Now it's just killing us. It's a disease of excess. So,
Yeah, we just can't stop eating it now. So yeah.
and yeah, because it's so delicious. But look, I just want to show you what's on my counter here, something I love. This is a white nectarine, a big one and a small one. And I have these here for my son because I hate to deprive him of all the things that I love that I've enjoyed throughout my life. And then he, but today he had like a day camp, right? 13 years old. He had a day camp where I had to drop him off at 8:45 and pick him up at 4:30. And what I've been doing is I give him a whole ribeye like at 8 before I take him. And I made him also, they're supposed to bring a lunch. So I made him a, really nice lunch. And he ate none of it because he wasn't hungry. He just ate that one ribeye and he was great all day. And he was swimming in the ocean and all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's like it's really good for him, I think. And I see when I compare with all the other kids that go to his camp that are their age, like he just glows. He's so healthy because he eats a ribeye every single day. Can you imagine?
That's
Like,
not the typical 13-year-old diet.
yeah, exactly. I mean, just to think how lucky that is because it's so delicious, right? So, should I talk about the research project we're going to do, Dave? You might be a co-author on my paper.
Yes, please.
I think you have to be. So, how many subscribers do you have now, Dave?
About 68,000 now.
Wow, 68,000. Okay. So, starting with your channel and your group of subscribers, and then you've done how many interviews now?
Just over 550.
Amazing. Okay. So, people sit and very carefully and honestly describe their journey and everything that they suffered from on a standard American diet or vegan or vegetarian diet, whatever they were on. And then they discuss all the conditions that got better. And you've been asking about periodontal health, which is awesome because that is really kind of at the heart of this disease process that leads to Alzheimer's, right? So, what we want to do, and when I say we, I mean my research group at Stanford. Right now, we are 17 researchers, and I'm sort of the principal investigator, so the leader of the research team. But the organization of my lab is also very flat because I have a lot of great staff scientists who also are quite experienced. Have PhDs, postdocs, in their, in their 40s or 50s, like, and even older, amazing people. So what we want to do is create a Google Sheets survey, which would be very easy to fill out. And right now we're planning how to set up the questions so that we can capture the great information that your interviewees have shared. And then we want to kind of do something like the Harvard School of Public Health did with their observational study. I think it was 2 years ago, and they did like 2,021 people who self-reported, by survey, their results on a carnivore diet. And of course, the results were just astonishingly good, right? People got off their diabetes medication, lost weight, just all kinds of conditions got better. Many of them, also they mentioned mental health conditions, going into remission. So we want to do something similar, but maybe have some questions a bit more focused on cognition. I have heard a few of your interviewees mention, they didn't even fully realize they had brain fog until they went on to carnivore. And then they're like, wow, how was I even functioning then compared to how I feel now? I'm so much more alert and sharper and able to be efficient, no matter what it is you're doing, cleaning the house or doing your work, it's better, right? So so I have my research assistant now, her name is Sitara Perkins, and she's wonderful. and she's working on this with two staff scientists in my lab. And so once we get this all together, what I was thinking is, we'll make a web page, and we're going to set it up so the survey will automatically download accurately into a spreadsheet and condense the answers so that they can all be organized and analyzed. And then we'll write a scientific paper from Stanford Bioengineering. Basically, I'm hoping that we'll start with your interviewees, and then maybe we can get Kerry Mann to make a video on his channel. And then eventually, like as we get the bugs worked out, maybe even Ken Berry, who I haven't met yet. But he has like 2.3 million subscribers or something. And, I think I'd say a lot of his subscribers are carnivore, probably not all, but let's call it easily 600,000 of his subscribers are probably carnivore. And then we would have a huge, it's one thing when it's 2,000 people, but if it's 200,000 people, the world has to say, this isn't an anomaly. This isn't a glitch. This is real. And I then, once we have those results, because right now I'm going from having watched all the interviews and kind of integrating the data in my own head, right? But once we have the actual data, then I'm going to start going on more podcasts and saying, hey, if you'd like not to have Alzheimer's, go on the carnivore diet, and here's why it works, right? And that will change the world. All starting with you, Dave.
Cheers. So in the meantime, before the website gets set up or before the Google form gets set up, how can people get on a list or show their interest or get in contact?
I would say they should contact you at your email, which is, what is it like? It's like realzerocarb@gmail.
Yeah, realzerocarb@gmail.com.
Yeah, so email Dave and just give him the email address that you would use, and that's all we would need. This will be essentially, and then, at first I thought, Dave, we would like trial it with your interviewees because they've all said amazing things. Oh, the young girl you had on today, she was wonderful, and I was so happy for her. Yeah, it's so nice to see some younger people just completely turning their lives around, because most of the interviewees are older, but I think it's starting. My daughter right now, so I have a daughter who's 20, and she's staying with me right now, and normally she stays with her dad, and then otherwise she's away at college. But I'm going to get her an air fryer. I'm teaching her how to make the steaks, and I made her a beautiful filet mignon and eggs today, and she's a convert because she sees a change in me, right? Me looking like I looked when I was in my late 30s, as opposed to how I had been looking prior to going on carnivore. Like for a child to see their parent looking healthy and see that their parent is so much happier, of course it makes them want to do it as well, because they see for you, your daughter must be so happy.
Yeah, I'm surprised how easily she's accepted it, And at first I thought it was, she just didn't have to share her candy with an extra person, But she's really into the steaks now.
This is the thing about steak, you do hear some people, especially if they've been vegan for a long time, they'll initially have a little bit of trouble with steak. But the good thing about steak, right? The more you eat it, like the more you love it, until the point where you must have it, right? At least that's how I feel. I really crave it. But for me, I'm like in this kind of mental, spiritual state now where I know I have a freezer full of, oh gosh, I must have at least 75 steaks in my freezer, and a bunch of ground beef and other stuff too. I know it's there. I know I'm not going to die from this fast. And if I was going to die, there'd be some signs before I did. I can always go make a steak. So right now, it just feels very exciting to be doing this fast and experiencing it. It's something you get to 55, you've experienced most things that people do. And this is something new and different and a new challenge, and I'm really enjoying it. But if people would like to email me just to talk about fasting or anything they want to talk about at all, Alzheimer's or viral infections. Oh, and I wanted to mention one thing that's been really cool is I've noticed at least now 5 or 6 people who said that they used to get cold sores, like little cold sores on their mouth or whatever. As you know, it's again, that's like among American adults. So I only know American statistics. It's 84% of people that have that virus, HSV1. And then how often it sort of will cause a little cold sore, or sometimes people call it a fever blister. That's a very individual thing, depends on the immune system, etc. Probably also on whether you have the P. gingivalis infection, right? But many people have said that those outbreaks stopped. And the guy who really fascinated me, and then I couldn't find it again, he said he had shingles on his back, and then it was kind of recurrent, like every 6 weeks or something, he would get a flare, which was very painful in the same spot on his back. But then after he went carnivore, suddenly it just swelled up huge, like almost like a baseball. And he said he was really alarmed, like, what's going on? So it swelled up, and then it went away, and then he didn't get it anymore. So it healed. See, I'm convinced all of these improvements, they really come back to our immune system is able to function now naturally the way it should. Isn't it just the most beautiful thing?
It really is, yeah.
And
So
we just need to go back to nature. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, so I was just going to say, on the email address, just to make sure that I'm kind of keeping all these emails separate and secure. It's probably better for people to send it to realzerocarb plus study@gmail.com.
Yeah, that would be
And
great. So,
that'll keep them separate.
and will it be a plus sign or a PLUS?
Plus sign, plus sign.
Plus sign. Real zero carb plus sign study.
Study@gmail.com.
Yeah, then you'll have them. So everybody who would be willing to fill out a survey and be part of an awesome scientific publication from someone who really understands carnivore, and and then when I have this person in my group that's kind of a skeptic because she's a big she really believes in the Mediterranean diet and vegetables. And she said, well, look, okay, so Dave interviews all these people. They all have their amazing results. But, we don't know about all the people that tried it and maybe they got sick. Maybe it didn't work. I said, well, I don't think there's going to be those people based on my experience. But yeah, I mean, what about in order to make it a more balanced study, you'd want some people that tried and quit, but
I've had people come on that have struggled, and they have issues. For example, like but you reminded me there of the gentleman that had a rash on his back, and he wasn't able to get rid of that. And every time he went on carnivore, that rash was coming back. But carnivore was so good for him in every other way, including mental health, that he was a convert to carnivore, and he was just like, I've got to find a way of getting rid of this rash on my back. So he was working around that.
Yeah. So let's think about the gentleman who had a bout of shingles that then recurred. Before it got better, it got worse, right? The thing swelled up like a baseball. Because when your immune system deals with an infection, what it does is all the white blood cells, and that's a whole bunch of different kinds of white blood cells, neutrophils, macrophages, dendritic cells, they invade. They release factors that cause inflammation, so there will be redness and swelling and possibly some pain or heat. And that's because they are busy having a war at that spot with the pathogen, and they're clearing away also cells that have been infected by the pathogen. So it looks like a big mess at first, but it will resolve, and then it should go away permanently, So maybe people just need to stick with it.
Right. It's just time, and of course it's whatever you're coming into the diet with that you already what issues you're coming in with, right?
Right. And in my case, like this total water fast that I'm extending, right? Right, I've had 3 children. I gained weight with each child, and then it never really came off. And that was a long time ago. So I was carrying around excess weight for years and years and years. And, um, I got to a weight I was happy with, but I still feel like I have historic problems to solve. That's what this is for me. This is almost like, so what I want to do, because I ate so many horrible things like seed oils and margarine, and oh goodness, did I eat terrible things, right? Throughout my life. And I feel like if I fast down to be quite thin and then regain the weight with beef and eggs and butter, then everything's clean in my body, right? And then I feel like I'm in a much better position to stay healthy for the rest of my life if I'm still not carrying around a lot of cells that were made with seed oils in the diet. So it's kind of like getting rid of all the bad stuff once and for all, and then rebuilding it only from good ingredients. And women will understand, right? Like we carry more fat than men do. And from what I've heard about fasting, that's interesting. This current state I'm in with zero hunger. What I've heard is that will continue until you get down to, for a man, 10% body fat. Then you will be ready to go kill and eat your neighbor. You'll be that hungry, right? Like, your body stops you when it's like, okay, that's enough, stop. Okay. So for a woman, I would bet that's more like 16, 17% body fat, right? Because we're not meant to be as lean. So I will find out. I'm going to get one of those. Maybe I'll go do one of those DEXA scans, at some point. Like, it'd be good to do it before and after. But it's quite a journey, and I just want people to know it can be done. And it's very spiritually significant as well.
Mm. Well, Annelise, I really appreciate you coming back on. And it's awesome to hear that you're doing well. You're trying out this new fast, and fantastic news about this study. I'm very excited about that. So I'll put a link to your email address in the show notes, but I'll also, if anyone's interested, just for the purposes of being involved in the study, I'll put my email address. That's realzerocarb +study@gmail.com, and they can send an email through to me, and I'll collect those for when the Google form's ready.
Perfect. And can you
Really
also,
appreciate it.
yeah, thank you so much. I think you're so important with what you're doing. And I would really encourage people to email me if they have thoughts about the study. And if someone wants to help, I'd be interested if they would read the Harvard study. Maybe you could put a link to the Harvard study in the show notes. I can send it to you. It's an open source paper. And, if they take a look at that study and maybe, give suggestions for how things could be better in their eyes, that could be really helpful because we're right at that design stage right now. So
Awesome. This is all very exciting. Thank you so much, Annelise.
okay, thank you. Take care, Dave, and have a great day over there.